Hi, I'm Ben Richardson, and you're listening to the Karate Podcast, where we talk about karate, the competitive sport of kumite, and the warrior's journey. Brought to you in association with Kumite Coach, the world's first progressive online high-definition coaching platform, created by coaches and fighters for coaches, fighters, and students of karate. Join kumitecoach.com today and take your karate to the next level. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Karate Podcast. Really excited to have with us today one of the British GOATs, one of the greatest competitors, ever produced, really, Calum Robb. And I'm sure everyone knows who Calum is, but if you aren't sure, then Calum is someone who has won a bronze medal at the Senior WKF World Championships, also a silver medal at the Junior World Championships. Not only that, but he also won a bronze medal at the Senior European Karate Federation Championships and a cadet medal at the European Championships as well. He's 17 times British champion, and that's just incredible. 8 times British International Open champion, 18 times Scottish champion, 13 times Scottish International Open champion. He's won multiple British University Championships and Scottish University Championships. In his own style, twice World Wado-Kai champion, 15 times European champion, and twice Commonwealth champion. He's also medaled at the Premier League in the German Open, in the Paris Open, and multiple events around the UK. And it's just such fantastic achievements, and I'm really, really excited to have Calum on the podcast, and thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. So could we just start, Calum, with talking about your story and really finding out, what events led you into karate, first of all, and then more pointedly, what led you on towards the path of being a fighter?
Yeah, sure. So I started karate at the age of 8, which I've going on the average these days is probably a little bit older. We have some kids now that I know that are about 3 or 4 starting. So I was a bit later coming to it, and I didn't take to karate that well. My elder brother, Ewan, Robb, who you may know, Ben, and Tom, he also he's a WKF European bronze medalist. He won it in Tallinn. I think Davin Pat got a bronze. I can't remember the year. Tom might be able to check and verify that for me. But
yeah, I think
I can't remember what year it was. Maybe 2002. Don't quote me on that.
I think 2002. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ewan was already doing karate. So I was born in Edinburgh, but brought up 20 miles east in the countryside, and there was a small club there in a town called Haddington, and Ewan had started there some years earlier and was already siphoned out of that club. He kind of outgrew it, and He went to Meadowbank under the expert guidance of Sensei Hamish Adam. And Ewan's actually now married to Hamish's, well, he's been married since 2003, but Hamish's daughter Pam. So Pam, so Pam Robb is her married name, but so Pam Adams. So yeah, Ewan, I was always going there with my parents to accompany them to pick up Ewan from Haddington when he was just still sort of transitioning to Meadowbank. And for the first few times I wasn't really interested, and then my father was really good with me, and he gauged me right. And there was one day I was bored, and I said, I want to try that. And I went to the club. It was under Sensei Alex Rorison, Wado-Kai exclusively. It was my style. And I started there, and it was mainly fun. I didn't do much in the sport. I didn't really compete until I was 12, actually. I was a little bit of a sort of silent assassin, as you will. I was just gauging everything, taking it all in. I'm son of a detective. My dad he's a retired detective sergeant in the police, some 30 years, and I do take a lot in. I got a bit louder as I got older, but I was taking it all in. And I went to that club for 4 years before I really started competing. And then I was also playing football at that time, and I loved football, loved Arsenal, spent a lot of time in North London with my aunt and uncle are based in Islington, so I was a huge fan and wanted to be a footballer, which every second boy does, So it was clashing. So I started my first competition. I think it was like a Scottish Karate Federation Open Championships. And I don't think I did that well. And it was clashing with the football. And then something just clicked. I won my first competition and I just got very, very greedy quickly, very, very hungry for accolades and titles. And the mindset switched. And my dad said he knew it then. He looked into my eyes and you could see that I was okay at football. He tenderly explained that you're okay at football and you enjoy it, but you're very good at karate, but the choice is yours. And he kind of left it in my court. And I thought, well, if I'm very good at that, I want to do that. And then from there, I just went on and on and on. And I stopped football almost immediately and just became hungry for accolades and obviously going to university for way too long, becoming a doctor of immunology. I was there for over 10 years. So people obviously got, like Tom, sick of me on the Bucks circuit. But that was
every year.
that was a really important time in molding me, because as you well know, in this country, it's karate, although probably in the top 5 for participation, but in terms of publicity, still we're not up there where we need to be. The Olympics inclusions helped with that somewhat, but it still needs to be publicized a lot more. And to succeed, you need to have the funding. Obviously was an issue, and it's sort of banking mum and dad. So in a minority sport, if you will, like karate, which sounds bizarre, but it still is kind of a minority sport, you need to have that ecosystem and that setup. And going to university really helped me. I was able to get a sports scholarship via my institute, which was Heriot-Watt University. Big up Heriot-Watt University. They helped me a lot, which is on the west side of Edinburgh. And it gave me that environment to train like a full-time professional athlete. But I wasn't, if you know what I mean, because back in the day, we used to fight, we used to have chats with the Turkish national team, the Iranians. They were incentivized, if they won, they got mortgage paid in the house. If they got a bronze medal at the Worlds, they'd get X, Y, Z, a car, and they'd fight like their life depended on it. And here we go back. If I got a medal, be maybe a mention in your local paper and a pat on the back, and on you go, son. So that was a really important time for grooming for myself, because I was away a lot fighting people on the circuit and exponentially coming away from the pack, so to speak. So, like you've got Murray, Nadal, Federer, Djokovic, you bring each other on, and I made my name there. So the uni days were a really important time in shaping my career. And that's when I had my most success, not just at university level. I think I won a European university gold, and I got a silver and a bronze at the World Unis, but also attained my senior world medal at the Nippon Budokan in 2008 when I was still at uni. So those were my best days. That was my best time. And then coming out of that time, getting a job, even then I had a setup that worked, because Professor Adriano Rossi, his son, did karate with me. He was a chemist. He did karate with me on the Heriot-Watt University team. He was my boss, and he is a 4th or 5th dan in karate now. And he's always been involved in karate. So even there, I had a little bit more flexibility than the average person would have going into the working world. But yeah, I didn't get my first job until I was 27 because of my PhD. So looking back, that time at university was my most prolific time. And then latterly after that, with a job, it became a bit more difficult. But yeah, started when I was 8, got greedy when I was 12, and won the most when I was at uni, to sum it up.
Yeah, it was Heriot-Watt every year.
Yeah, we won.
Senior heavyweight, open weight, team kumite.
That was it, and it was all about mat time. And the unis was tough, because I had a lot of respect for people at university level, because, I had a big shaved head and I looked the part. But, to step on that tatami and do it for fun, and you're going against somebody who does it and it's a way of life for them, that takes guts, right? So I got a newfound respect for people. Even if they looked intimidated, they're still standing on that mat. Their karate's not in their blood. It's almost like journey through university. Yet they'll stand on that line. So I had a newfound respect for those people. But yeah, Heriot-Watt, I don't even think we have a karate team now. It was the glory years. We won the 5-man team with 3 fighters.
Yeah.
We would do the skipping thing, medals, and it was a great time, and we travelled a lot. And yeah, big up to Heriot-Watt University. They helped me a lot.
Amazing. Was there a particular point as you were coming through the club phase where you realize you're going to commit yourself fully to fighting, or were you was your club geared to that anyway to push you into that path?
So at Meadowbank Karate Club, we were one of the biggest karate clubs in I mean, I'm talking 2003, so nearly 20 years ago, so we, it was a Western Karate Union, and there's people like that, the names in the clubs. We were a prolific club, and when I won my cadet European Championships in 2003, minus 75 category. I'm about 110 now, believe it or not. But when I won that really super focused me towards going for the accolades. I wanted to be world champion. I was twice. For my style, I never got that gold medal in the all styles. And there was a few times I came close. I got my bronze and I was happy, but it was at Meadowbank, we were always encouraged to fight. And it was, and I think looking back, health and safety, it would be riotous to look at what I did. But, fighting up as a 16-year-old into adult sections, that was all learning for me. I mean, that would never happen now. And I'm happy to say it on here. All thoughts and opinions are my own, etc., etc. But actually, that's the way it was then. And I loved it. And I wanted to, if I was fighting you, Ben, I would try and take your scalp because you were over 18. I was under 18, and I was hungry. And when I won the Cadet Europeans in Poland and Vaslav, I came back with like a newfound confidence. And I was dangerous then because I was full of confidence, young and hungry, and my dad always said that, in karate, again, a detective looking at it in black and white analytically, he never did karate, by the way, he just was my biggest fan, but also my biggest critic. Looking back, he said, I've looked at karate and you need the 3 Fs, and they're fast, fit, and fearlessness, or to be fast, fit, and fearless. And you can train to be faster and fitter, but fearlessness is something that you're born with, and you'll get found out. And he's very true. You can look across the tatami and look into the whites of your eyes. The way in auto tactics, you can get little leverages, you can get little tactical plays. And I think I just had that ruthlessness and fearless streak in me. Yeah, also had a bit of a brain in my head, which I think also if you're dangerous and you're smart, it makes you quite a successful entity. But yeah, I think it was when I came back from Vaslav in 2003, I had a newfound confidence, and I knew I wanted to go to uni, and I knew what the platform could be like. So I'd already worked out that, my mum and dad provided for me, and I wouldn't have achieved anything that I have achieved if it wasn't for my parents' financial sacrifices, because you guys know what it's like, right? If you travel in the circuits, I used to go on my own, right? There was no Sports Scotland funding for us. It was literally off my mum and dad's. It was banking mum and dad and going away on my own, integrating with some of the English contingent or the Welsh that were away, etc. And then just going to I think it used to be the Golden League back in the day. You'd fight the Italian Open, the French Open, the Dutch Open, and it was a hard transition for me as well, Ben, because when I turned 18, I was fighting minus 80 back in the day, the old school category, and light heavy. And that was tough because actually I got my ass kicked a lot, but I learned a lot. And there was like a 2-year period where I was just going away, and it was hard. I'd be quite analytical and harsh on myself. I just became the Cadet European champion, but I couldn't hold my own in the senior category. And I knew I had to go through that bleeding phase, and get my name out there, get my name recognized. And after about 2 years of that, I moved up to heavyweight, and I came into my own, and I knew that's where I wanted to be. It was a natural weight for me. There was too much dieting involved for the minus 80. And yeah, sort of came into my own after about 2 years. So it probably all came together around 2005. I got a junior world silver medal in Limassol in Cyprus, and I always remember that fight. It was against Almir Kekunjakin, so he's from Montenegro, and I was winning that fight by like 5 points with literally 15 seconds to go, and he caught me with a spinning Urmawash, which I still look at it now and it gives me anxiety. Like, it's just like, how did I not see it? But it was ridiculous. But that, when I came back from there, I knew that was a natural weight for me, and I just went on from there, really. And actually,
looking back, I would have liked to have medalled a lot more. I got beaten for bronze twice in the senior European all styles. You know, those are medals lost for me looking back. I wanted to win more European and world titles, but one's enough for everyone, just sort of saying, you know, and I'm glad I got one at the Europeans and one at the Worlds.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. And the level we're talking about is way beyond what, 95% probably of competitors will get to experience. Yet we've all, got our own experience of competition. And one of the things I wanted to just pick out from what you said there was, you said you had a couple of years where you're getting, your butt handed to you as you're moving from cadets into the seniors. And my own experience, a lot of people joined, say, the JKS squad when I joined, but over the years, that losing means they're not there 2 years later. They've had enough. They don't like the loss. They move on to other things. And I think that's probably true in a lot of sports. Everyone sets out with good intentions, but when it gets really hard, they leave. And so I'm curious as to what your motivations were. Was it the fact that you had this super strong vision of where you wanted to get, or was it you were just at a point of maturity where you could look at the losses as ways to improve? What's your feelings around that?
A bit of both. I was quite analytical. I did a lot of VT analysis, and my dad, the first thing that I would do is go home, and I've been, what it's like 10 hours in a competition hall, and you just want to chill out and go to bed or have a drink or whatnot. But my dad would be religious with me, would sit down, would look at things. And that was very analytical, but also just wanting to be just a willingness to succeed and just being completely ruthless, just wanting to be a Scottish legend. And, I was indicted into the Scottish Hall of Fame in 2003 at the age of 17 when I returned from Vaslav with that Cadet European, because I think at that time there'd been a dearth for several years of a Scottish medal or presence. So I think on that sort of tidal wave, I had there was a lot of hype around my name when I came back from there, and I took that on. This might sound funny to you guys, but fighting at the Scottish National Championships became an ordeal for me because everyone wanted me. Yeah. It became a tough comp, right? And you can probably relate. It's, Tom Bennett, it's like if you're in the club and then Sensei's like, right, we're going to have a wee competition. It's going to be first to score. Like, can you all go to the side? I used to hate that. And that sounds completely ridiculous when I'm fighting in front of hundreds of people in like Stade de Coubertin in Paris. But actually, it was a compliment to me at the same time, because that's where I was. If I beat somebody 2-1 in a Scottish Championships and they're like, oh, I only got beat 2-1. It doesn't matter if you get beat 2-1 or 8-0, you still got beat, but they would cling on. And that was a compliment to me, actually. Do you know what I mean? So I think do you know what I mean? So I think riding that wave, coming back, but I was just completely greedy. And my dad said that, he said he had a very handsome police pension from his years there. And he said, he also said, mom and dad always wanted 4 children, but we've got 3, and obviously that's fine. But they said if we'd had one more, I maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity that I had. But my dad was also quite brutal in the fact that if my attitude was wrong, or my performances were dipping, or he thought that I wasn't enjoying it, he would pull it out because it was a lot of expense, right? Yeah. So we kind of worked together. He was almost like my agent. And don't get me wrong, my mum was like my PA. I mean, I hate organizing things now. I mean, my mum would book all the flights, all the connecting flights, the hotels. So I really had that set up, and I thank them. But they just made it easy for me. And I was just greedy. I was just ruthless. And, I haven't really seen somebody in Scotland with that ruthless mentality since then. I just want to see that, not nastiness, but doing the circuits. There's a few people that are doing very well, of course. The last Europeans, we had 3 bronze medal finals. That's great. And England had a silver medal there. And I think Amy got a bronze. So that's great, right? But I'm just talking about that ruthless mentality, being away every other weekend, and that's what I had. And I did it for 25 years. Karate, it's it's a chunk of time. It's a long chunk of time. And even now, I was saying to Tom before, when you were reconnecting there, it was it's a long time. It's a way of life. It's still in me, even though I've retired.
Yeah.
And we'll maybe touch on that later on about the karate combat. But even then, there's, you know, I'm thinking, what could I have done, or what could I have done better? But there's still things in me that I want to do, not necessarily competitively, but in terms of giving back to the sport. So now, hopefully, that we're coming out of COVID, or, you know what I mean, that relaxation is happening. There's still things that I want to do. But yeah, just to sum it up, very analytical. You know, I've got a PhD, I'm a bit of a statistician, you know, that's what I like to do, but also just having the raw elements that you know, you have to be selfish, you have to sacrifice those nights out. You know, I making up for it now, of course, but when I was a young boy coming up, I was often the driver, getting stopped by police, getting breathalyzed completely. I didn't have any drink, you know, because I'd be going away the next couple of days, and you know, I was regimented with that, and those are the things that you need to do. So yeah.
And if you started coaching now a lot more, would you do that in terms of starting your own club maybe, or would you go to one that you're already affiliated to, or would you want to have your own kind of stable of fighters that you want to completely own? Or
I think it'd be good to have my own club, but I don't have any desire to do it. So probably leverage people that I you know, latterly fought with, Chris Yu in karate, who's got a very successful association now, one of the top clubs in Britain for sure. I would probably go back and work with the elite crop, but I also acknowledge that karate is a journey. It's a life journey for people. So I'm not just elitist. I mean, I can talk to people from all walks of life. I'm now into scientific sales, so I'm pitching things regularly to people from lots of different spectrums and sectors. So I think I could be a good life mentor, and I could probably gauge quite well what people, based on the student, what they want out of the sport. But I think I'd probably work better with the elite crop. I think that's where I could be deployed.
But you could, but if you needed to, you could coach a 5-year-old beginner still.
For sure. For sure, I've got for sure, and that's something that I've been doing a little bit in my seminars. You know, I always talk with the sensei beforehand and pitch the level, and you know, they have a lot of beginners often, and we split it into different classes, and I pitch it appropriately. But at this moment in time, I don't have any desire to open my own club. It might be something in later life that comes into the mix. You know, it's just a bit hectic in the everyday schedule, and I'd want to go all in. I wouldn't want to have the job that I have. I'd want to go all in. I'm not that good at partitioning, which is probably why, you know, once I came out of uni and just floating about fighting, that I probably wasn't as successful. I just wanted to be all in there, and it wasn't, you know, like I said many times to people on the squad, I was like, when we wake up and train, they're training. When we're having lunch and then going back to work, they're training. You know, in the evening when we do our second session, they're training. And then it became an issue about going away and, you know, being landlocked. People that were in Central Europe were fighting each other every other weekend and getting the cobwebs tapering before big competitions. They just had that set up, and I got quite jealous of that. And coming out of that nice sort of professional setup that I had at university level, it became harder to hold my own in those major competitions. So it probably had something to play with that. But
do you think do you think a good starting point for getting that instilled in people is to do that kind of group training around Britain with all of the high level competitors together? Because I don't feel at the moment that maybe happens as much as it could. So do you think
I think for me at the time it was big. I went away with Alton a lot, Natalie Williams. I went away with David Godfrey, who was prolific. He had a similar mindset to me. Remember Dave Godfrey with the two shaved heads? I started
off in Cardiff, so yeah.
Yeah, and Willie Seagram and Willie Seagram. Who's now, you know, Billy Seagram. So those guys would just kind of go away as a mini GB rather than an actual set nation or club. And I think for me, there was no other way. You know, I remember Hamish speaking to me saying, "You're winning everything in Britain, but we need to get you sharper abroad." And the only way to do that, I wasn't really getting the competition at that time in Britain. And the only way to do that was to go abroad to better myself. And then there was a bit of a lag of, like you said, Ben, getting your butt handed to you a few times, but then you go back with your team, my mum and dad, my coaches, senseis, you look at it, you train differently, you refine, and then you come back. And if I hadn't went away like that, I wouldn't have achieved those medals downstream for sure, because I liken it to Rangers or Celtic in Scotland. They win everything in their own country, but then people become expectant, your fan base become expectant, and then you go away and you get beat first round of the Champions League or knocked out in the group phase. And then people were like, but Calum, you're like the British #1 and you got beat first round at the European All Styles. That's what you're working with. And then I worked out that obviously the standard is next level on the continent. These guys are most of them are full time training all the time. So that's what I needed to do to close that gap. So that's what I knew, that I had to do that. And the only way to do that was, first of all, go away on my own, make friends, and then go from there. And it was sort of, like I said to Tom, a mini GB kind of thing. And those were the best years, going away, chatting, just like a journeyman, like a nomad, doing training camps, staying in Paris, suburban Paris, just staying in little hotels, very unglamorous. And then it's all towards one moment, getting that mat time and exposure.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm just interested because obviously I've been a competitor, but I've always been a coach, like almost, I don't know, since I went to university, coached at university, ended up having my own club, competed really to start off with just to try and inspire some of the kids coming through the club. But one of the profound things for me in terms of my, relatively short competition career was when I had a change of coach. My coach became Matt Price. I think it's one of the best coaches, out there. And so I just wonder, you've obviously done a lot of analytics yourself and managed to have that, mindset. To what extent have different coaches had a role in your development through your career fighting?
Yeah, I mean, every coach sees something different. And big up to Matt, by the way. I before I had my first karate combat fight, I was down seeing my father-in-law in Harrogate, and he actually berated me. I was sharp at that time, and he swept me. He's a beast. I got him back. I think it was in front of his own. We were in his own club, and I took a little bit of the class, but he caught me good and proper, and it kind of was like, oh, I haven't been swept like that in a while. Bad man kind of thing. But to answer your question, there was a lot of people, Ticky Donovan, Willie Thomas, because of course I'm quite unique in the fact that I have an English national gold medal as well, because my mother's English, so I've also got that uniqueness that I fought there. But I had a lot of influences, and Willie Thomas was a big influence on me. He was very analytical. He did the Peak for Karate stuff. He modernized the sort of sports science game. He was very educated on it, mastered up to the hilt. So he was great. We had the rawness of Ticky and Wayne back in the day. So I was actually very lucky that I was getting to go away, because obviously the home nations were disbanded. I can't remember what year again, Tom, but then GB was a great time to go away and get all these expert coaches who would come away for the GB uni team. So the GB still existed for the university team, but not, all styles level.
Yeah, it kind of left with Ticky sort of.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of went out of it, yeah.
And Ticky taught me a lot. He taught me to use my reach. Even the first instructor I had, Alec Rorson, and he has the dual karate club. He got my left Yakuzuki going, and that was a huge moment. I think early on, my left yak, because I was a problem, because I was like 6'4.5". I was quite fast for a heavyweight, and that's the bread and butter. The Ashi Barais and the Moashis and things like that are a bit more glamorous, but this won me world titles. So he got that going. There was Noel, is it Wellington, Dai's coach. He also helped me a lot when I was going away doing the sort of journeyman stuff. So my point is everyone sees something different. Hamish Adam was obviously well connected from all his time in the GB days and being part of that prolific team. We'd go back and we'd recoup, and not even the coaches, it would be trends as well. So when I came back, when Agayev changed the game and for the way that sport karate was, I was seeing that firsthand. Agayev was on the fight before me when I won my Cadet European gold in 2003. He was -70.
Yeah.
He won, and then I came on after him. and just seeing the way he moved and the fluidity of it, so often I would come back with new ideas, new video content, and we'd watch it together as a club, maybe before or after the training session during a stretch out. And that would, like you say, Ben, bring on the rest, because kids from the age of 5 upwards, they're like sponges. And if you can get in early and instill things like that, movement patterns, or the way that they finish and sell techniques from an early age, it becomes natural. That's a crucial time for them. So we also did a lot of things like that. I would see trends, evolutions in the way points were scored, how to sell it to referees. But yeah, I had a lot of different influences, and they would all give me something different. Like I said, in the early days, it was more using my reach, the old school stuff. And then with Willie latterly coming on more S&C. So I would make a lot of notes. I've always got a pen in my hand, always got a pen in my hand. Even when I'm chatting to you guys, I've got a notepad. Why would I write stuff down? You're podcasting me, but there's always something. I think it's a scientist in me. Yeah. So I would always make notes, and I have it backed up on the computer. So yeah, very analytical. And there's been a lot of people that have helped me a lot throughout my journey. Very lucky.
And did you have any moments through your competitive career, or just as you switch coaches, where you remember dramatically changing your training structure to achieve a different result?
Yeah, for sure. I needed to get better at moving after university. So when I fought for Kaizen and I got my K1 Premier League medal, I had a lot of fights that day. And I think Willie will always remember it, but I tactically we've been working on slipping, closing distance, being more fluid with the movement, because I wasn't using my legs as much, and everything just came off that day. And I remember spending a lot of time with Jordan Thomas and Willie and Michael Burke at the time, drilling techniques, doing crazy things that up here in Scotland we weren't even thinking of, drills, I'm thinking of the ropes when you're trying to build explosive power. All these things were new to me, although people were doing it on the continent, and Willie brought that to my game, and then I could apply it. It was like functional training. So the bean bags, all the coordination, catching the bean bag, bringing it back. And at the start, I'm thinking, what is this? But then actually, you put it into the actual scenario base. So you'll break it down. You'll do the sort of the beanbag thing, and you throw it, and you've got to, move your feet like a crab sideways, as if you're scaling the tatami, and then you actually put it into a scenario. So he brought a lot of scenario-based training, and that's something that I was quite new to. It was quite alien to me, because what it's like. Sometimes you just fight and people are like, do you think about what you're doing? And I honestly can't remember. If I've asked you that, Ben, do you think when he does a kazami, are you going to slip it and do front leg mawashigiri? It just happens.
Yeah.
If you've been asked that, I get asked that by kids. They're like, do you think a lot when I'm fighting, or where do you look? And I never know what to say, because I don't know. Actually, some people say, I always look at the chest, I always look at their eyes, or I actually don't know. And when I was fighting, especially with Hamish, we just used to fight free sparring. I'd always want the older people that like my brother, Big Chris Ewan, Stevie Adam, all the mutants of the club, as I would say. It would just, Hamish had a tough job just watching the club, and he'd be like, right, change, yummy, because he'd see it. He'd have to oversee if it was getting out of hand. Yeah. So I think what Willie brought to me was breaking it down, taking a step back, making it more functional, and drilling scenarios. And then it's a light bulb moment when those scenarios work. There was a time when Agayev and people like Biamonte, they would take people into the corner, and you would think that that's a disadvantageous position, but they would turn it in. It would almost lull the opponent into a false sense of security. So they'd, almost like this hip dipping back, not taking a jogai, and then lulling them in and making them miss an ashibaraying, or switching them round and doing a moashigiri, chudan, or something like that. So that became a lot more prevalent with Willie when I was at Kaizen, and it worked that day at the K1 Premier League, and that was a big thing for me. It was also on my bucket list, so to speak, with accolades. I wanted a K1 medal, and I got one that day, and I must have had about 7 fights. I think I got to the quarter final, but there were huge pools. You know what it's like. Yeah. You look at the list and you think, oh my God, I'm going to need to fight, and there's everyone there. Senegal, Qatar, France B, C, D, and you know that these guys are all good at the pool of talent they've got. They're all good guys. They're trying to make a name. So that day, I think in between each time, taking on fluid and the syrups and all that came that time as well. A lot more sports sciencey based. Before that, it was more raw, and that got me far because I had the 3Fs. And then I think I refined more functional S&C, more scenario based training. And that's something I do a lot, ironically, now, although I learned it more laterally, maybe 2015 or so. I bring it into my seminars now because it is important, and it's something that I got a big effect from. It had a big change in the way that I fought.
Fantastic. And did that come in part of as part of rule changes as well?
Because exactly.
When you're kind of going in, like when I'm thinking about like 2008 World Championship, which is when you got your bronze there.
Yeah.
And Agiev was obviously, that was when he was kind of getting quite prolific then, and won a lot in there. But that was kind of the end of a period where if you had a bomb-proof gyak, you could pretty much fire that and pretty much get wherever you wanted to go. And do you think that the rule changes were part of a shift in kind of towards more explosive techniques like your head kicks and your sweeps and things like that? And
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I think the Kazami, after the World Championship 2008, Kazamis became a lot more prevalent, and Agayev's elder brother, I think, don't quote me, is a very experienced judoka. So the Ashibarais that he brought in, the Sotogeris, and using opponents' momentum really worked, and it was a massive string to my bow as a heavyweight. I know people didn't like me, and that's something you have to deal with as a champion in your own country. They're like, oh, it's Calum, Robb, he's just getting the points. But I used to just bully people, especially in open weight and team event. They may be sharper than me, but I would just two-hand grab. You've got that 2-second grace, sweep them down, finish, 3 points. And it was a little bit boring. And they then brought in the one-handed. So there was a lot of different ways to manipulate. And I think what happened at that point was people worked out that the most common scoring technique was Kazami. Okay, so if you look at the French team, they throw a lot of Kazamis, Costa, but they also slip it really well. So how can we slip if people throw that Kazami very committed? You're over the front leg. Your back leg's often off the ground. You've exploded off your back leg, but you end up with the back leg off the ground, and you end up really chest to chest and in quite a vulnerable position. So people then, and we did it with Kaiser, and looked at how, especially when you went into the corner, how you could lull them in. They'd throw that. You can either head tilt left or right, depending. And as they come in, you can play on the rules, but not essentially grabbing, but you can use one hand and use the other one to flick them while you're ashibaraiing them over. So you can turn a negative situation or what looks like a defensive position into a positive. But definitely it was always a minefield with the rules. And I always remember the Paris Open in January. It would be like this, okay, these are the new rules. We're going to experiment at this Paris Open, and it would be carnage. There would be no consistency. But definitely that's one thing that I didn't evolve that well. Agaev is unbelievable, the greatest ever of modern time for sure, in my opinion. He evolved well with that because Ashibarais were a huge part of his game. Yeah. He then evolved. He probably evolved and coined when you're in chest to chest and he almost goes for a yak, he uses that to get out and grabs the arm and Moashigiri round the back, and then that was patented by several fighters. So big props to him for that because he evolved with the times. And maybe didn't evolve that well with I got a lot of warnings for two-handed grabs because it's quite unnatural, right? Not to do that. I think, especially when you've been doing it for over 10 years, 15 years. So there definitely there was elements of that. And I know a lot of coaches up and down the UK looked at that, looked at the top karatekas, looked at the VTs, and then adapted training appropriately based on that. And I think Willie Thomas, come back to him again, I mean, he's qualified up to the hilt and he was English coach for a while. He definitely brought that in, the training programs and how strategic and how analytical it was. And he really had a lot of analytical content in there and evolved the training with the current rule set. But I wasn't a fan. I wasn't a fan of the rule changes. They let contact go a little bit. It became, in my opinion, a fast game of TIG. I liked a little bit of slogging. I think karate lost a little bit of its DNA, in my opinion, with the contact. But they've kind of now, they've came out the other side, because for what happened was when they became strict on contact was, you could see it. The layman's that would watch would be like, I would show it to my mates, it'd be like, yeah, but that was a great punch. It wasn't even that hard, but the other guy won. And the message to them was the weaker guy won, for sitting there having beers. I'm like, hang on, he didn't do anything and he's just won that fight. So I think part of the progression, and obviously to get into the Olympics, the IOC don't like blood, but we needed to make it explosive and exhilarating and on the edge of your seats. So they brought back this, if you're feigning injury, you're, I can't remember the exact terminology again, but they're clamping down on that. And that was good to see, because for so long.
It's Bobby, isn't it?
Bobby, yeah, exactly. And what would happen is that I think somebody looked at it analytically. I can't remember who it was, but I certainly seen the presentation that X percentage of medals, a vast majority at world finals one year, were won by weaker fighters based on penalties. And I think they needed to change that. So I think it's back in the right direction.
Yeah. That's what was I going to say? One of the things I wanted to ask you about was you talked a bit about the sort of need for conditioning, the physical conditioning side of things. I think it's accepted now that if you're going to perform in karate, you have to be an athlete. You have to train like an athlete. In your time as a competitor, was there a push or a focus towards psychological training at all?
A little bit.
Do you think there's a value in that now, as someone who's probably moving towards the coaching era?
Yeah. So Merv, do you know Mervin that used to fight? He was heavily involved with Kaizen. Mervin Etienne, do you know him? Merv, yeah.
So Thomas talked about him.
Yes. So he does lots of cognitive, analytical. He's a big fan of Headspace, and he really helped me visualize. It's something, again, it was new to me. I was quite raw, like I've alluded to, but I'll always entertain a different angle that can give me that extra 0.1 or 2%, because you know what it's like when you're going away a lot fighting and it's me, Jonathan Horn, Maniscalco, whoever, Enes Erkan, we're all much the same. It depends on the draw a little bit or who's feeling it on that day. But if you can get something that just rises you up slightly, you would bite. Again, it's greed, it's elitist. You would bite somebody's hand off for that. So I was always open to these, and Mervyn helped me a lot. He taught me how to visualize. So words of affirmation, believe in it, and it was a bit of a strange concept, but actually you begin to internalize and process it, and it becomes part of you. So that was really powerful, and also just the Headspace app, relaxing, being in the right headspace pre, during, and post competition. It's not just before and during, it's also after, and how you recover and recuperate. So with him and Billy, I was able to add elements to my game that I probably wouldn't have had if I hadn't had their influences. But yeah, Mervyn's he's the man for getting in your head, for sure.
Yeah. And do you have a particular routine that you discovered worked for you pre-competition?
I'm not superstitious, but I'd always, it's weird, it's going to sound weird, quite embarrassing, but when I stayed with my mum till I was mum and dad 27, but I'd always close the door with my bags packed. Then I'd open the door as if someone's in there and say, the next time I come back here, I'm going to be the British champion. And then I'd close the door again. And whether that's a superstition or a ritual, it's probably in between.
Yeah.
And there was no real, I'd have my set gi. I'd always tie my belt in a weird way. I'd have a little ruffle. If you look back, I actually didn't tie my belt properly. I always tied it in a very unique way, and I could tie my belt properly, of course, but I tied it in that way, and it just, again, when you're young,
Yeah.
sponge habit. I think I must have seen someone doing it. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I always have this little ruffle at the side, and then I've obviously got the knot, and I'd always have the same belts, and I'd have my favorite herringbone Adidas ski, but apart from that, nothing really superstitious apart from the room thing. I was a big fan of Powerade when I competed, and a big fan of Jelly Babies, which used to make people laugh because I can remember Jonathan Horn looking at me, and it was in between, and we're backstage, and he's just like, "You look like a big baby." Sometimes I suck my thumb when I'm tired, and I'm eating Jelly Babies, and I'm in the quarterfinal of the world. It's just a bit weird, but they helped me. I got a good kick off them, and
Right.
I was a big fan of Aquarius drinks, for isotonic replenishment and things like that. But no other real funny things apart from the room. I'd always shave my head. I used to, obviously, you guys know me. I never used to have hair, and it was just, I didn't want to look like a thug. But then somebody told me that I look really intimidating, so I thought, I'll take that again if there's anything that I can take, you know. So yeah, that was quite an interesting one. But I'd always shave it the night before, or if I was fighting in the afternoon, sometimes I'd shave it that morning. I'd always have to be sharp for some reason. So yeah. That's that.
I'm interested also in what you just said previously about headspace post competition, because I think, well, I certainly would work on pre, and then at the event I'd have a certain things I'd do to ensure that I was focused and ready to go and in the right mindset. But I don't think I ever did. I definitely didn't do anything post competition, so I'm just interested to hear a bit about that.
So yeah, so a lot of people don't. It sounds strange, but actually, if you feel a certain way after a competition and you've had say you've fought and you fought out your skin, everyone's told you were amazing, but you still don't feel great.
Yeah.
Why is that? And then if you deep dive into that, there might be something that you did that day or something that happened that day that you can pinpoint and rectify. So what I did, I remember one time, so that K1 medal I got, I felt great. I felt like I'd won it. I felt like I got a European medal because I remember everything that I'd trained for, the scenario-based stuff, it all worked. You know, you get those competitions when everything just works. Yeah, I didn't get gold, but I felt amazing. And actually, I probably felt better than some of my bigger medals. So I remember that, and Merv told me, write it down, because then you know that's your benchmark at the moment of the dizzy heights. So then what you can do is you can actually look back and think, oh, I've won that, but I don't feel good. Be honest with yourself. And then it helps you pinpoint maybe what you could have improved on. So just being quite honest with yourself, again, it sounds cliche, rate your feelings out of 10. And I got really into that, and I never really hit 10 that often. And people be like, you fought amazing. You've not been using your legs much, Calum. You're getting a bit older, but you fought really good. You used your legs, but I'd still be like, yes, 7. I don't know why, but then it sometimes come to me the next day. Other times it would come in a week's time. And again, it's writing stuff down and just using that to better yourself. And a lot of people don't do that. And I don't know how common how it is now. I don't know if a lot of people are still doing that. It'd be interesting to hear from people that have maybe achieved a lot more than me or current sport karateka if they do a lot of post headspace analysis and how they do use that to set a barometer or threshold for the maximum level that they think at that time. And then anything below that, why is it below that? And what can I do to better myself?
Yeah, that's really fascinating, actually. I think Jordan is one of the few people that I've interviewed anyway that's talked about similar things. I don't think he brought up the post competition. We talked a lot about sports psychology and Merv and his influence on his career. But for me personally, I've got a background in sports science. I think that those areas definitely can add a lot to some people, and for other people are going to give them that little bit more that maybe they wouldn't have got without it. But it's certainly something that I try to focus or at least make my competitors aware of. And I think the pre-performance thing, just removing all those
outlying things that can cause you worry, such as your nutrition on the day and your kit and all that kind of stuff. And like, taking ownership of that, making that part of your routine is just a simple thing that's going to result in less stress for you, and hopefully then the right mindset for your performance. And
For sure.
As a fighter, like for me personally, not at the same level you at all, but I found over a number of seasons that my best performances came when I felt happy and kind of like almost joyful about the fact that I was at this event, I had the opportunity to compete, I trained hard, and like, I'm really glad I'm kind of there, as opposed to previous years. I would think, right, I've got to be tough, I've got to look tough, I've got to go smash someone, and that sort of I get quite a negative kind of frame of mind, of trying to get tough, which didn't work for me at all. And I'm sure it works for some people. And I'm just interested to know what worked for you in your opinion.
Yeah. So I'll answer that question. But I was going to say, again, hindsight's 2020. The vision's 2020. So why wouldn't you use that? And that's another thing about post-analysis. Like when you retire, you look back and you think, I remember being bad that day, or why did I do that? And I always go back to that Junior World Final. Why didn't I just Yakuzuki is back? Why did I let him go all the way around and Urumo spinning? And actually, even if it takes you a month, 2 months, 3 months to pinpoint what it was that's stopping you feeling a higher rating out of 10 that day, it's all learning for you. It's all self-refining and nurturing. So hindsight's great. But yeah, to answer your question, I did this a lot. I remember the first time that I went away, it was the World Junior Championships in Athens. And I think it was in 2000 and Tom's going to check this. I think it was in 2001 or 2002. And I was minus 70 and I was bricking it. I went away. I had no clue. I'd done a little bit, so at that time I was 16. Of course, the next year I win the cadets in Vaslav, but I think I was even in the wrong category. It was doomed from the start. I was meant to fight minus 75. And then when we got out there, I was told that I needed to be minus 70 and there'd been a mix up and it was too late to change it. So all the usual stuff. So the guy that was lighter had to put on weight and I had to lose weight, whatever. Yeah. And I went on to the warm-up area. I think the teams were first or something. We had a 5-man team or something. I can't remember. But we went and it was like seeing Iran and France. And I always remember just watching again, taking it all in, a little bit starstruck, looking at all these glossy tracksuits. They were doing line outs, all going up, just doing a Kazami and a spinning Urumawash, Kiai in the place. We were all timid in this little like bit of the, what it is like, and we had our gear there, but we'd move it, we'd be too soft and kind. And the French would be clambering over us, and we'd eventually just subtract to the wall, and we'd do a couple of kicks and warm up and go on. And I remember coming back being like annoyed, thinking they bullied us. And actually, when I watched them, they weren't that good. It was all a show. And actually, what I used to do as captain of the Scotland and the GB Uni team was the competition doesn't start when you're on the tatami. It starts right at the start. Even if you're on the same flight and you get off and you're in the hotel foyer, you'll do anything you can. If you're elitist and you want to win, you'll do anything you can. I mean, friends off the mat, enemies on it and all that. But people would say, like, are you a psycho, Calum? Because I would be laughing and joking at sayonara parties and and all that with the crew. But before, I would go into this mode of being a bit moody, almost a little bit like, oh, is he? And that's something that I did to try and just get a little foothold, a little stranglehold. And I always remember that in Athens. And I said to the team, that's never happening again. I wasn't even the captain then. I was really young. I was like, that was bad. Like, we looked like you could do anything to us. Like, that was bad. So I always make sure, even if we are doing what they did, we're trying to just do all the glossy stuff, but it does catch some people out. You never know how they're feeling in that day, in that moment. They could be very experienced, but if they're having a bad day or something's going on in their life, and you can prey on that and get in and fester into their head, I would do that. And then the shaved head thing, I did probably utilize that it was a bit of a stereotype, but it maybe worked. Maybe not on the continent when I was fighting the elites, but it got me quite far in my own country. People would just look at me and see this brick shit house and be like, oh god, you know, I might be quicker, but if it's a yaman, he dings me, or is he going to be annoyed? And I would leverage that. I would warm up. I'd do loud key eyes. I'd walk with a swagger. And as I started to accumulate accolades, I'd use that as part of my persona and part of my almost stage show, you know. But yeah, I always remember that. So now, so latterly when I was away with a senior Scottish team, we'd always make a point, and there would be little scuffles because people would still come into your space, and you would just push them away, and people would turn around and be like, "No, I'm here. This is my mat." Just because you've got 20 people there doing a line out doesn't mean you get to do it and all this. And so yeah, I learned quickly like that, and I've always remembered that. So again, it's coming down. Yeah,
all that work for Mike. All that work for Mike Tyson.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean,
he used to do that.
You look at it, you know, and you do. If you're an elite athlete and you're hungry to win titles, you will do anything to win them. You know, it's just like my current job. I remember my hiring manager last March, and I almost probably came across as a bit psychotic because I said, this is my new competition arena. And he's like, what? You just didn't get it. And I said, well, there's my red line. That's my target. And, you know, I'm competing with other companies. Those are my competitors. That's who I want to fight with. And I'll do anything to win. So that's what you're hiring. You're a winner. And it made me stand out. And he thought, God, you've got quite a lot of front, but also willingness to succeed. And I was saying to Tom earlier that a lot of these skills are transferable fully. And that's something that I talk about. I do the Q&A, and it's the most funniest part, especially with the younger generation. At the end, you get any type of question. It's ridiculous, but great. But I also say that, you know, even if you do this sport for fun, and that is what I want you need to manage your own expectation. You know, you can get some parents that live their life through their kids. You see it all, but as a coach or somebody as a bystander or experienced like us, you need to say, look, you're never going to be that level. I know that's hard to hear, but you are a very good club competitor. Yeah. But the skills that you learn throughout this journey are unbelievable. And, you know, the willingness to win, self-drive, you know, ultra focus that you can have, just all these things can be translated into everyday life. And they definitely help me excel and succeed in my general life, whether it's my academic life at uni or just general stuff, you know. So yeah, it's always been there, karate. I eloped. I took a seminar in Arizona with the Wado-Kai contingent, and that's where I got married to my wife Abigail. So karate has always been there. It always crops up. She's just always there. The entity that is karate is always there, and it always comes up when I'm chatting, when I'm going for interviews or whatever. It just seems to always come up. But it's definitely bettered me as a person, and I look back on a great career with no regrets. There's a few fights I regret, but no regrets in terms of what I did.
Yeah.
So karate combat. So what was the story there? What was the motivations? What got all that kind of going? And
so when I retired, I had my last fight in a Wado-Kai Europeans under Chris Ewan Karate, and it was in Sardinia, and I won. I went out at the top, so that was good. Wado-Kai, I must make clear. So then came back, had a little bit of time out, did some seminars, and then randomly got into Muay Thai, as you do, and joined a very good club here in Edinburgh, and started sort of doing Muay Thai, and I really liked it. You know, it's like Kaizen, continuous improvement, development stuff. I like not being top end. I like just coming in, being able to hold my own, and just every day's a school day. And I was enjoying that for about 9 months. And then Karate Combat came out, and I thought, wow, that looks good. That looks really good. I'd love that. So contacted Karate Combat, and my body fat was too high. They wanted a chiseled look. They wanted the aesthetics. So I actually went on a fasting diet. I went on a 16/8, so I'd fast 16 hours of the day. So I did this for 3 months. I think I've got before and after pics on my Instagram. It worked really well, but I was a bit energy depleted. But I thought, you know, I then started getting into amateur boxing as well, to try and do a bit more stand-up. But the first fight that I had with Black Magic, he kicked my ass, actually, and I realised then that I'm getting old. I was quite honest with myself. My dad came back and said, you need to learn how to box or hang up the gloves, because I was a bit of a punch bag. I just didn't go. It was very different. I was sitting at home, probably still thinking I was 25, you know, going on to tatamis, thinking I can do X, Y, Z. But I went in there and I was a bit like a rabbit caught in the headlights. It was on a huge stage. It was in Hollywood. You're in a sunken pit. You're wearing 4-ounce gloves. We're hitting each other. It was madness. It was like a huge rush. I can't even remember half of it. It was like 3-minute rounds, but it felt like literally a minute. You know, I came off, I was battered and bruised, and he won it unanimous. So like, it was a bit of humble part. I came back and I was a bit deflated, and I thought, that wasn't great. I'm going to really need to improve. And then, because I thought it was quite a natural evolution for me to, as the old bull, the heavyweight, a bit heavy-handed, retired, but still kind of young, you know, sort of early 30s. I think I had my fight in January 2019. So, and then I came back and I went to Lock End Amateur Boxing Club, where Josh Taylor started, the undisputed champion. Props to Josh Taylor. But I went there and I did really well at amateur boxing, and I had a few fights. I did really well, got my hand speed up. And then I fought Franklin Mina, who was also a sport karateka. He fights for Ecuador. He had a few fights as well. I must say, the guy I fought first had 3 fights before, and it was my debut. So maybe I should have chose somebody that was but that's not in my DNA. I just wanted to take him out, and it didn't work. So Franklin Mina had 1 fight. I think I had 1 fight, and he'd won, I'd lost. And it was a bit closer, but again, people were saying, oh, you deserve to win. But I didn't, again, post-analysis, I didn't feel right. I didn't really enjoy it. It sounds a bit weird. I enjoyed the first one. He was knocking lumps out of me. But the second one, I think it was a real chance for me to show how far I'd come, and I still didn't do that. And I knew there and then that was time for me to step away from that. I went back and did a little bit of boxing, and then we moved house, and geographically it was a bit different, and I got a new job and things, and obviously with COVID things were different. But yeah, no regrets. I'm glad I did it. You know, I'm glad I did it. I wish I'd found the sport earlier in my career, but then, you know, with that, I wouldn't have achieved what I've achieved in sport karate, which is what made me what I am today. But I'm glad I tried it, but it's a lot harder than it looks, and props to anyone that goes in there, because it is tough. I think the way to train for it's still up for grabs. I mean, what's the best way to do it? Probably a little bit of stand-up, kickboxing, K1 kind of stuff, and a bit of core boxing, protecting the chin. But I think years of fighting like this, to then having the chin protected, and, you know, just instead of doing this, actually falling right through, you need to like fast track yourself. And I think that's what I tried to do with the Muay Thai. When I went in there, karate combat wasn't on my radar, but everything that I'd done, the principles were different. So in Muay Thai, you're in the pocket and it's just all hitting. It's all action. Like in Muay Thai, you're going to get hit, right? It's not like karate where we could go through a comp and not get hit, you know, so to speak. But in Muay Thai, you're going to take damage. And then when I went to karate combat, the rules were still, it was a bit of a pioneer phase still, because it looks really glossy now. And I'm kind of involved. I know the CEO and president, Adam Kovacs, and we sometimes have catch-up calls and stuff like that, but the rules are a lot more set in stone. But that's mainly a pioneer phase. And when I went there and did my knees and elbows, they said you can't do that. And I was thinking, oh, I've just been training for like 9 months in the pocket, and I'm not allowed to. You're not allowed to kick from the hip bone to the knee. So you do a teep in Muay Thai to put them off balance. That's exactly where you do it, or in the solar plexus. Obviously, Mayagiri, that's fine, but not on the thigh. No elbows, no knees. And I thought, oh God. So I just went in there, and what happened. So that's why I tried to refine it. And I really thought I could change my performance for the better, but it just didn't work out. I got beat unanimously again. I thought I had at least a round, but but no regrets.
And even it seems to have karate combat itself, like you said, has evolved, hasn't it? Even since they started, because they had a lot of just solely guys who come from their WKF backgrounds. And I could describe how it started as all very WKF-y, so with the kind of long stances and even some bouncing in there. And now they kind of already aren't really doing that anymore, and there's a lot more kind of those other elements that you were talking about, isn't there?
It's interesting because I think on the last card, the last event, if you watch it back, there was a very experienced golden belt. It's Edgar Scrivers, so he's had a lot of amateur MMA fights, but he has a tedious link back to karate. Does that give him an advantage? Probably yes. He's probably very comfortable with a full contact scenario, whereas we as sport karatekas aren't very used to that. We're used to start-stop combat. And then you had the Olympian vs the world champion that they were bigging up, and they're two current sport karatekas. But if you look at those two bouts, they're both very different. And I think, like those guys and me, I think we're a true representation of what a sport karateka going into a full contact scenario, quite fast tracked, is like. So I think now the way karate combat is growing is that they have people that have obviously done karate, but they're allowing people to come in that have maybe only done karate a little bit, but have had more MMA experience throughout their career, and they want all action. And like you said, Tom, less bouncing, and they want the nice kicks, and it's a great spectacle, right? And it's great to watch. It's unpredictable. It's all action. It's maximum engagement. The referee's always telling them to engage, and we were told that. So it's great to watch. And you know, during the pandemic, at a time when live events are over premium, they managed to put out some events, which was great, right? And they're now hosting another live event, I think on the 24th of June in Orlando, or maybe it's Miami. So they're going back to live. So, and they've got some nice people on board. They got Machida, John St. Pierre, Baz Rutten there, and Wonder Boy. So they've got some good people on board, and I think Adam says it right. He's putting karate back on the map, and I know that. Remember that fight between Agaev and David Donna, when David Donna hit him, and people are like, "Is he sparked out, or is he faking it, or is he?" And then I think David Donna got disqualified, and Agaev obviously couldn't continue. I think Adam was at that event as a just a bystander, just watching in the audience. And he thought, karate's losing the way. I want to put karate back on the map. I want to be able, and in this political minefield that is karate today, it's good that it can get people from the WKF that are still competing in Worlds and Europeans to come in and come out, which is good. I think so. He's putting it back on the map, and he's got some great names in there, and it's a great platform and that he's got. So good luck to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Calum, I've got one more question for you.
For sure.
What's lined up for you next? What's your next sort of goal towards in karate in particular?
Yeah, so doing some more seminars again, and then we'll go from there. I was doing a lot before COVID. Spent a lot of time in Wales, up and down the UK really, and I do stage community seminars. I do seminars for beginners. Like I was saying, it's not just elite, although that's where, you know, if there was a crop of people there, that would be very much accepted to me. So just giving something back, you know, if like I said, hindsight, you look back and see how it molded you as a young boy to a young man to a man, and the skills that it's gave you and the discipline and what's happened throughout your journey. And if I can give, you know, not just karate, any martial art or sport in general, it's not for everyone, but it has its benefits. You know, I sometimes have this debate with people over lunch. You know, it's I've got an elitist view of it, but the social integration that karate or sport can give children, and you know, the confidence. I've seen kids come in that are frightened of their own shadow, or they have behavioural problems, and they'll do karate. They'll realize they're not immortal, they're not the strongest, and they have literally an instant discipline instilled in them, and that's really powerful. And it's nice to see, and it's I think I've got a lot to teach, and I think that's what I'm going to do. As I said, later in life, maybe my own club, but at the moment, I'm focused on maybe getting back on the seminar circuit. I'm also involved with a traditional martial arts clothing line called Art Martial Clothing. So they've got commissioned artists on board, and we do some really cool martial arts lifestyle wear. So I'm involved with this brand at the moment, and we're looking to grow it out digitally. So we have several advocates on board. Jonathan Horn's one of them, and I think we've got Mitchell Thorpe, who's current Karate Combat. He's on the roster. So I'm enjoying that. Getting involved, chatting, doing exhibits with them up and down the UK. So I'm enjoying that, meeting new people. But definitely getting back onto the seminar circuits. It's high on my agenda.
Fantastic. And what's the best way for people who are listening to reach you in terms of seminars? And
yeah, I've got my own Facebook page, Calum Robb Karate, but I've also got obviously Instagram. But my I can send details on. I don't know if you want to put it on a blurb, but yeah, I'm always contactable. My inbox is open for everyone. I'm always here to bounce ideas off. So yeah,
we'll put that in the link below.
Yeah.
The podcast description. So that
no worries. I could chat for hours, guys. I know it's getting late,
I
isn't
was
it?
just thinking, I've only got through about a quarter of the questions I had, so we're gonna have to get you back on.
Yeah, I can be your first part too, right? Because I waffle. Yeah. Let's do that. We can do that. Let's do that. Let's make that. But thanks for having me, guys, and thanks for letting me tell some of my stories. But I'm happy to come back on and whenever you need.
That would be great. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, that's great.
Been fantastic.
No problem.
Talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
No worries. Cheers, guys.